if you've been paying attention, that music was from a piece called Wapango by Jose Pablo Moncayo. He composed it in 1941. That's a music is kind of a dance that is popular in Veracruz in southern Mexico. And the local song inspired the work. Moncayo composed it while he was in Tanglewood in the United States visiting his friend Aaron Copland, the American composer of Appalachian Spring and the ballet Rodeo, among other works. So, welcome, fellow Rotarians and guests, to meeting number 5262. When he was club president, Bob Key began identifying the meeting number, and that practice has continued ever since. That's according to Ken Wiener. August birthdays, you saw that slide there, John? For the August birthdays. Today, Janica Clem's birthday. She's a rarity. She was born and raised in San Jose, went to Gunderson High School in San Jose State, a degree in health sciences, minored in dance, works in corporate philanthropy with an emphasis on government relations. So happy birthday, Janica. Also today is the International Youth Day, and also heard this morning it's International Elephant Day to celebrate the existence of these largest land mammal that's currently walking around the earth. They do this thing, the United Nations marks international days to kind of educate us about certain issues, political resources that are available and global problems. And so every day it seems to have a particular designation, and today happens to be the International Children's Day, Students' Day. So Candace Roney, she's given us the inspirational thought for the day. She's from Santa Rosa, graduate from San Jose State in 1970, joined Rotary in 1998 in healthcare management for over 40 years, the last 7 with the County Dental Society and Foundation. Candy, are you with us?
I am.
Hit it.
And my voice is on, I think, right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay.
Why did I get muted?
Huh?
Yes, you can share.
Okay.
No, stand up a little higher. That's better.
Okay. The inspiration I chose today comes from one of my favorite philosophers, Winnie the Pooh. I shared it last week with a very close friend who underwent a stem cell transplant Thursday at Stanford. She's having a really rough time. So I text her every day with some part of this, as I did last week. Then I started to think how appropriate this is for all of us as we help each other through this pandemic, and on a broader and grander scale, perhaps Rotary too can be a piglet for the world. Today was a difficult day, said Pooh. There was a pause. You want to talk about it? Asked Piglet. No, said Pooh after a bit. No, I don't think so. I don't think I do. That's okay, said Piglet, and he came and sat beside his friend. What are you doing? Asked Pooh. Nothing really, said Piglet. Only I know what difficult days are like. I quite often don't feel like talking about them on my difficult days. But goodness, continued Piglet, difficult days are so much easier when you know you've got someone there for you. I'll always be here for you, Pooh. And as Pooh sat there, working through in his head his difficult day, while the solid, reliable Piglet sat next to him quietly, swinging his little leg, he thought that his best friend had never been more right. Let each of us be a piglet for a friend having a tough time, and I know we all know people who are these days, and Rotary for the world, because these are difficult days for the world too.
Thank you, Candace. It reminds us that we have to count on our friends, and the friends are what make our life so much more livable and pleasant. Thank you. Next, we have Jason Alexander. He's from Colorado, born there, graduate from University of Texas in Austin, and got his PhD from Vanderbilt University. He's now the Associate Dean of the Department of Philosophy at San Jose State, and he chairs what a new committee that we have in Rotary. It's called the San Jose State Rotary Committee. With him is is Marie Tuitt. She was a star basketball player in undergraduate school, and she was in the news recently because as the director of intercollegiate athletics at San Jose State, they won't be playing football this year. So they're going to give us an update on that new committee. Jason, I think you're up first.
Hi. Let me make sure. Yeah, I'm not muted, right? You all can hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'm coming to you both from the phone and the video today, and I'm going to share a screen here in a minute. But just to kind of give you an update on where the committee is. This committee got started back in February with a push from President Emerita Karen, and we've had a few meetings right before the public health orders kicked in. So it's been a challenge to kind of get this committee up and running. But the basic purpose of the Rotary SJSU committee is to help develop the infrastructure and the connections between Rotary and SJSU, help SJSU better partner with the community, the downtown community. There are two basic initiatives that we're working on right now in the committee. The first is to try and help develop a Rotaract club at San Jose State for the San Jose State students. So kind of making baby steps in that direction. There used to be a Rotaract club. I think it's had several incarnations, so we want to get that restarted at some point soon. The other objective of the committee is to help Rotarians connect with SJSU. Both we have a number of alumni in Rotary San Jose. We have a number of people in the community who would like to be involved with San Jose State. And let's see, I'm going to share this screen. So a number of the things that we're working on are in the kind of realm of, this is the wrong screen, I'm sorry. In the realm of town and gown initiatives.
Well, just tell us what plans you've got for the.
There we go. So one of the things that's going on right now at San Jose State, for instance, is an effort that we call the Spartan Bridge Project. And the idea behind that was during the weeks of welcome, during our opening weeks of the semester, to help welcome students to San Jose State and introduce them to the community that surrounds the university. COVID came in and forced a lot of businesses to shutter, a lot of community partners to kind of shutter for the time being, and it made difficult the outreach efforts of the university. As a consequence, the weeks of welcome activities have not really connected to the community this year quite as much as we would like. But you can see that we've developed a website for the university to help students become oriented to the community. So a number of the things that the committee, the Rotary Committee, is doing are about trying to help develop these sorts of connections. And if you're interested in helping us do that, then just reach out to me, please, and I can help tap into San Jose State. Now, if Marie's here, I'd like to ask her to say a few words about these town and gown initiatives as well. And you sent me some photos to share with you too. So, Marie, are you here?
I am, yes. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, you've got a minute and a half.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, the Town and Gown initiative by our university is just simply to connect San Jose State more with our city. So I just first want to thank all of you that are part of Rotary and all the good work that you do. I live right downtown in San Jose, and you do important work. And part of our focus is how do we connect local businesses to the close to the campus, and basically welcoming back students and faculty. On a quote normal year, there'd be 35,000 students returning to campus and close to 4,000 faculty and staff. Campus is open, and we are going to be welcoming students back next week. It won't be to the level, obviously, as in previous years, But the whole initiative is to, in the Town and Gown, as tagline, is just simply to say to our city, look, we're coming back. We want our city to welcome the students and faculty and staff back. And then we also want our students, faculty, and staff to be aware of the opportunities for them in the surrounding establishments around our campus. So our committee's been working really, really hard. You will see the rotunda in blue and gold to kind of kick off the week, and we have a number of events scheduled. And then the pictures that Jason is showing, just real quick, those of you that perhaps have not been to South Campus in quite a while, where SFQ Stadium is located, you'll see the whole east side there is now down. You can see in the background a new 4-story parking structure that's going up. But there'll be a $50 million building, the Spartan Athletic Center, going up in that footprint on the east side of SFQ Stadium. So if you're out driving around someday and want something to do, drive on down to South Campus. If you haven't been there in a while, the 65 acres that South Campus sits on has been transformed in a number of ways.
Thank you very much. We look forward to going over there. I've graduated from there in 1962, so I know how much has changed. Well, thank you, Jason and Marie. Good luck with this new program, and let's hope our sports programs at State get back on track.
Yes, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Sure. Today we had what was the inaugural delivery of the van that we helped buy to give to Catholic Charities, and we had a kind of an event in front of St. John the 23rd on 5th Street, and some pictures were taken. I don't know if they will make it here, but we were there with Greg Kefferly. He's the CEO of Catholic Charities, and we had Jeff Spino to receive this, and we had Karen Sinunutari, our past president, because it got started on her watch, and I thought it was appropriate to have her there to help cut the ribbon and give this a proper send-off. And I was proud to be a part of all of this. Let me read what we have given to Jeff. The Rotary Club of San Jose's Rotarian of the Month Award is given to Jeff Spino, president of Mission Valley Ford Trucks, for his exemplary service above self, who in the true spirit of Rotary has always said yes whenever we have asked for his help. Most recently, he and his company, by providing and outfitting a multi-purpose van within our budget, made it possible for our club to donate that van to Catholic Charities of Santa Clara County for use with their underserved communities. So on behalf of all our members, we thanked Jeff Spino for he's being an exemplary Rotarian. And I think that they took pictures of the certificate, and you may see it at some point later on. If not, then I'll show it to you right now. Not that you can see it, it's just to show that it really did take place. Plus, I gave him a Rotarian of the Month award. It was pointed out by one of our officers that said, you know, Rotarian of the Month doesn't really capture what we feel for Jeff, but that's what we have. We don't have anything more than a Rotarian of the Month, so we'll see what we can do in maybe finding a Rotarian of the Year dedication. Next, we have past president from 2016 and 17, Cindy Faulkner. She'll be presenting our past president, Karen Sinunutari, with her end of year book, which Cindy prepared, which summarizes Karen's many activities and successes as our president. And she did a hell of a job these last several months of her term. So I think, Cindy, are you there? And Karen? Come in, Cindy. Come in, Karen. Are you
I'm
unmuted?
here.
I'm here. I had myself muted. User error. Thank you, President Fernando. Karen, it is with my absolute pleasure to present you with this commemorative book of your year, your amazing year, half of it being a virtual president, one of the best experiences, I think, for all of us to have this weekly getaway and still be able to see each other. But with the help of the photography committee, the summaries committee. I can't really do it justice here, but I'd like to hand this to you and let you say a few words virtually. But you know, you really were an amazing president, and it just shows so much in here, and we love you. So happy to do it.
Thank you so much. As you can all see, it made my hair turn white that last year, but it was a fantastic year, and this book just touched my heart, and Jim and I were teary-eyed looking at it last night, and I thank you, all of you, the meeting summary people, photography committee, Leslie, Cindy, and Elaine Sullivan, for giving me this gift that I'll treasure forever. Thank you.
Your hair looks great, by the way. I love it.
Cindy, you did a wonderful job. And by the way, for those of you listening, Cindy did 2 books, one for Karen personally and another one. No.
No, Karen actually did the last book. So she knows, you know, all about it. And she did that for Gary. And so then I took it over for her year.
All I'm saying is that there's another one of these books for those of us who go to the Gordon House. Next time you get a chance to go there, there will be a copy there for you to peruse. Karen will have her own personal copy, right?
Yes.
Am I right?
Yep.
Well,
Yes. Sorry, Fernando.
yeah. It looks terrific. You know, just you do wonderful work, and I'm looking forward to getting a chance to take a look at that book that Karen summarizes Karen's tenure in office. Thanks to both of you. And thanks also, Karen, for being there today to help cut the ribbon. It was an honor to follow you as president, and I am trying to do my best to emulate all the things that you started off. I want to keep them going.
Thank you.
You bet. All right. Well, now we've got some time to talk about this experiment that we've been dealing with. As you may have heard, we tried to get what we call a breakout room before the meeting, but it presented some technological problems. And so we've decided to do the breakout rooms immediately after our meeting ends at 1:15, with the idea that there'll be separate breakout rooms to meet the interests of the various people. Think child care, elder care, small business problems, issues like that, or a general conversation. If you don't want to go into any of those chat rooms or breakout rooms, you can just stay on after our meeting ends at 1:15, and like you were doing just before the meeting started, you can continue chatting with your fellow members. It gets a little complicated if you're going to sign into those chat rooms. So you have to kind of sign in on noon Tuesday before our meeting, so that our staff can line you up into the appropriate breakout room. And well, we'll try it. It'll last for about 20 minutes, so it's not a long-term issue, because we don't want to keep our staff working any longer than they have to, and they're staying afterwards in order to help us out. And some of you may not have been tuned in when I talked about this, and that was that I had described the difference in language of using the word fine as a noun as opposed to an adjective. As a noun, we typically use it to make it as a punishment for having some transgression, like I explained to Bert George, like having the cell phone go off in the middle of the meeting, or chatting or talking while the program speaker is delivering his or her remarks. So instead of making it a punishment, I thought I'd change it to an adjective and say, you're not going to get a fine, you're going to get a fine opportunity. So this is just repeat for some of those who were here before, but for those of you who hadn't. So instead of being a fine, it'll be a fine opportunity to celebrate an important event by ringing the bell at $100 per ring. And I have my own bell so that we can know how many rings to make. So if you get a chance, and Next week, Gay Crawford will show us how she plans to celebrate her fine opportunity as a way of kind of showing you the steps that are necessary in order for you to begin doing this at the end of every month, the end Wednesday of every month. This month will be August 26th. You send an email to, excuse me, Gay Crawford, telling her the good news that you want to celebrate, how much that means to you, in dollars, of course, so we may know how many times to ring the bell. Money raised will go to the club's foundation to pay for things like a wheelchair for a disabled child or an adult, or perhaps to pay for a van like the one we just gave to Catholic Charities to help our large and growing underserved communities of essential workers. Please note, these are fundraising events and they'll be on the last Wednesday of each month. So let Gay Crawford know in advance so that you can come online and tell us what you're happy about. Finally, there's a dire need for financial support after this horrific explosion in Lebanon that we all saw on TV last week. Unimaginable losses of innocent lives, thousands permanently injured or maimed, not to mention the emotional trauma of losing homes, having your city virtually was wiped out. Perhaps, I don't know, but I'm hoping that Rotary International will initiate something to help the Rotary Club of Beirut. There must be something that Rotary International is planning, and we plan to find out. All right, that is something that, we have one of our members here, Eli Abujadi. Sorry, I messed up.
Yes, Abijode.
Now, that one. He's from Lebanon, and he has relatives in Lebanon. Thankfully, I understand most of them were spared other than minor injuries because their homes are far enough away from the actual blast. But we saw how horrific that blast was. They heard it back in Cyprus, 120 miles off the coast. So it was a hell of a explosion. And that Lebanon has been going through so many bombings and riots. I mean, you got three major religions: the Islamic religion that is split up into two. You've got the Catholic, or the Christian, the Christian religion. And each of these three different takes on religion have their own perspectives and their own ideas to how to govern. That makes it all the more difficult to render first aid to these poor folks that are suffering so much, but I'm confident that we'll come up with something.
Thank you.
With respect to the use of the chat feature on our screen, use that as we have been to relay information or congratulations or introduce your guests. But when it comes time to introduce the program speaker, we'd appreciate it if you just use that chat feature to ask your questions. That makes it a lot easier for the person introducing our program speaker to sift through the questions and figure out which questions to pose. So we've got David Ginsburg, my favorite Eagle Scout, who was born and bred in Burbank. He's a graduate from UC Berkeley, had a master's degree in George Washington University, and since 1997, I think that's correct, he's been deputy to the county assessor, whom we all know and love, Larry Stone. And David Ginsburg, will you please introduce our program speaker for today?
I'm happy to do so. Thank you, Virtual President Fernando. It is during a crisis that the mettle of our political leaders are tested. Even without the obvious comparisons to national leaders, our speaker today, Cindy Chavez, Supervisor and President of the Board of Supervisors, has repeatedly passed test after test, and she has done so with compassion, grace, and even some humor. In my book, she has earned more than a high GPA. While I'm biased, as I've known Cindy for decades, as an executive manager, I can attest to the difference she is making on the management of the county. While we've not always agreed, I've never found her disagreeable. More importantly, she has a tireless work ethic, true passion for public service, and is not afraid to acknowledge mistakes and change course. Cindy has always made sure that the voices of those that have been left out are being heard and acted upon. She's in large part the reason why the county has one of the most aggressive affordable housing initiatives in one of the nation's most expensive housing markets. The breadth of the issues she has championed have ranged from first in the state bail reform for nonviolent offenders to overhauling the county's foster care system. Looking at her background as a parent, policy wonk, and community organizer, she is exactly the right fit for this moment. A moment in which we are not only dealing with the greatest public health crisis, but also forced to confront systemic racism. It is altogether fitting that on the 100th anniversary of the suffrage movement, our county not only has a smart woman at the helm, but a strong Latinx. Please give a warm Rotary welcome to another San Jose State success story, Supervisor Cindy Chavez.
David, that is so kind, and I can't even hug you, but I do think you're in the same building I'm in, so I will get 6 feet within you and wave wildly. I am really excited to be with all of you today, and what I wanted to do is just to say a very sincere congratulations to Karen for all her good work, and Fernando to what you're venturing on. Any support I can be, I know you'll reach out. And I really want to thank Suzanne and David for making sure that I could be here with all of you today. You know, it's sad to be here in a way. I'm mindful that we don't have our bow-tied, elegant presence, the elegant presence of Bob Keeve. And I know you all miss him. And I've been thinking an awful lot about leaders recently and about what I admire most in them. And he was certainly one that I enjoyed a good debate with, and I always left learning something from him. So I just wanted to acknowledge him. So I thought it was interesting that Candace started off with a story about Winnie the Pooh. And as I was listening to her, I was thinking that I want to be mindful that I'm not Eeyore today. But I do want to talk about, just very honestly, the challenging situation that we're facing as a community. And I want to leave time for feedback and thought for what all of you are thinking that we should and could be doing as a community. So for many of you know that I became president of the board, and what a year to be president. I started out the year thinking that we were going to tackle everything all at once. I had no idea that we were in fact going to be tackling everything all at once. So what does that mean? What that means is that COVID-19, as you all know, has been a defining event in our lives. It eclipses for our region Loma Prieta, 9/11, the Great Recession. Here in our community, we have over 12,000 cases, had over 12,000 cases of COVID, and we've had over 200 deaths. And what we can't calculate properly is the impact to so many, many people about what the crisis has done for them and their families. But because of this, we've had an opportunity to do some really good things as a community, and I want to spend a little bit of time talking about what those are. I'm really pleased that you had Dr. Cody, so I don't need to go over all of COVID. I have been asked to focus on a couple of areas, and I thought today I would focus on testing. But I want to make two things clear. One, that this does create an opportunity for us, and two, that we're the people we've been waiting for to help us. And I say that because we're not going to have, even with incredible elections, there's not going to be change fast enough at a ground level to help us dig ourselves out of the COVID-19 hole. And I want to say I appreciate very much the leadership of the state of California, but they need us as much as we need them to address COVID-19. So what that means is that we're going to be dealing with this as a community, as we have been, on our own. And I don't think that's a bad thing, because I'm just going to tell you what I tell everybody who asks me. If I was going to be in a fight against an invisible invader like COVID-19, structural racism, disproportionality, economic challenges, the list goes on. There is no place in the whole world I'd rather be than here in Santa Clara County. And there's no team I'd rather have than the people who live, work, play, and worship in our community. And that's all of you, leaders in in the Rotaries of the world, in any number of organizations. And we've had a number of people just stand up in a way that has not only been impressive, but literally life-saving. Our challenge here is really even more profound because of the inequities we face in our community. And I want all of you just to, because you know and love this community, to close your eyes for a minute and listen to the statistic I'm about to give you. We have more residents who've tested positive in the single zip code of 95127 than in the cities of Cupertino, Los Altos, Los Gatos, Palo Alto, and Saratoga combined in one zip code in San Jose. And the communities that are disproportionately impacted and at risk for contracting COVID-19 are many of those who are working in our frontline work, which is in grocery stores and truck driving. They could barely afford to live here before, and this is an even more dangerous place for them now. This is the same community that's impacted by schools not opening because they don't have access to broadband or computers. This is the same community that is impacted because if you make less than $24,000 a year, you are 50 times more likely to be unemployed right now than if you make $75,000 a year. You know, in our community that we have 43,000 people at risk of being evicted and becoming homeless. It is part of the reason that we've done something, I think, relatively fast and innovative to make sure that we're testing the communities that are highest in need. So let me talk just for a moment about how the county has addressed testing. And fair warning, I'm going to tell you something that is going to require some of you to hold on to your hats or your socks. And that is the following. The County of Santa Clara, our government, is testing more people and has a faster turnaround time than any of our private sector partners. That's right, you heard it here. In fact, you will find that depending on where you go, the tests that you're taking could take up to 2 weeks to get back, which almost exceeds the time that you would have to be isolated if you were needing to do so because you were afraid of an exposure. Now, let me say that there have been lots of reasons that the county has been able to do this. One, our lab has 2 separate testing processes. The second one uses different chemicals and reagents than the big private labs are using, so we don't have to compete with them for supplies. We've sought out medium-sized FDA-approved labs and have had fast turnaround times by partnering with new partners, in fact, emerging partners in the market. We have found them, we've signed contracts with them, and they have accepted a partnership to take our overflow. What that means is that we haven't yet hit where we need to be in testing as a community, but I do want you to know that we in the county are conducting 38% of all the tests with our healthcare system, including VMC, O'Connor St. Louise, and our clinics, where we have only 15% of the patients' lives that we're responsible for countywide. This has meant being both nimble and committed, and I really want to just acknowledge the public servants that have made this possible. We need the county's private health partners, and we're continuing to work with them to get them up to scale so that we can, in fact, test more and more people in our community. You know, I know that you all have been hearing that we've also had challenges at a state level with data, and I'm happy to talk more about that. But what it's showing is that at a local level, when we work together, that we can accomplish things that can't necessarily be accomplished at a state or federal level. Now, I'm going to also just acknowledge another big challenge that we're having with COVID-19, and that is the impact on mental health. Many of you know that the County of Santa Clara, really because of Supervisor Jim Bell many moons ago, has spent more of our local tax dollars building out our mental health continuum of care than almost any other county in the country. But what we're seeing is that even now, it's not enough. Researchers in China have found that 40% of the youth are found to be prone to psychological problems after their pandemic, and almost 15% of their community children are suffering from something similar to post-traumatic stress syndrome. The National Child Traumatic Stress Network reports that preschool and young school-age children are often responding to COVID-19 with loss of speech and more challenges with toilet training, that they have difficulty separating from parents, are engaging in repetitive versus less imaginative forms of play. School-age children are having difficulty concentrating and learning in schools, and sometimes are in the process of doing things like retelling stories over and over again and getting similar consistent ailments like stomach aches or headaches. We see some of our adolescents acting with self-destructive behaviors and are having trouble sleeping. These challenges are unfolding right before our eyes, and while that is happening, we're expanding our county's mobile crisis unit that focuses particularly on youth. I just want to give you another statistic. In 2019, we had over 1,200 calls for service and referral. In the months of February through May, we've hit almost 710. So we know that mental health is something that we're going to have to work on again at a local level to make sure we have the resources for people who are most in need. One of the other things that we did as a county in partnership with the city of San Jose is invested almost $12 million in making sure that every child in our county has access to a Chromebook and a hotspot so that they're not missing more and more school. Now, we don't have all the resources we need to address this, and unfortunately the county is going to have significant budget challenges. We're reviewing our budget again at the end of this month. What it does mean is that we're going to have to work collaboratively and closely together and take advantage of things maybe we didn't see in the past. And I want to give one example, and I was really excited to get to meet with Rotary's environmental crew. They were just a great committee. And what I was sharing with them is that while we saw what the closure of our businesses did and people not being on the roads, one of the things we saw was an extreme increase in high air quality. We have actually, if you haven't noticed it, we have had more mammals in particular, but animals surviving in our communities because we've had less strikes with them with cars. So one of the things that we've done is, wearing my hat as the vice chair of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, is we're asking corporations and public sector entities to cut their commutes by pledging to allow for some percentage of their workforce to work remotely, as that's appropriate for their businesses. Now, let me just skip and get to the end, because I see the box opening up with questions and I want to be able to respond to those questions. You know, this has been an extremely challenging time, but I want to just acknowledge what David said at the beginning of our discussion, and that is that I've seen extreme leadership. Dr. Sarah Cody being enormously brave early on, leaders like Jen Loving from Destination Home challenging the public and private sector to raise over $30 million to help the lowest income communities we have. Leslie Bacco from the food bank standing up what seemed immeasurable. Dr. Dewan and all of the schools contributing to the over millions of meals that have been served. Nicole Taylor opening up her arms and being a place that we could work collaboratively to raise resources that so many in our community need. We've expanded work in childcare, remote work, the digital divide, and all of that while we've been fighting COVID-19. So that gives me great hope that working together, even if it's 6 feet apart, wearing masks and wiping down services, that we can in fact save lives and come out of this a stronger, more deliberate community about the community we most want to be. Thank you.
Excellent job. So many good questions. Fernando, should I just go ahead and jump in?
Jump in, Phil.
All right, because we have a lot of good questions here. I've kind of grouped them. I'm going to start off with some questions around COVID. Several club members had questions about testing in terms of reliability, in terms of, why does it take so long to get results? They cite 10 days, others cited 3 days. The cost on tests, and then the social justice component of it is how is the county addressing the high COVID incidence in low income areas?
So great questions. there's many that I can answer and one that I can't on the cost. But let me just go back and recommend that everybody take a look at secfreetest.org. And if you go on that website, what it will allow you to do is see all of the locations that have testing sites. And if you click on any one of them, it'll tell you what kind of test site it is, how you have access to it, and whether or not you need an appointment. So what we're really focused on is on the east side, we've increased the number of testing sites there, including putting permanent sites at Mount Pleasant High School, Overfelt High School, James Lick High School, and we're partnering with our community clinics to also make tests available there. We're testing upwards of, just the county, upwards of, I think we're at a couple thousand now a day. And we have the capacity to do more. We're putting tests out in the east side. And in addition to that, over the last couple of, I would say maybe last 60 days, we've invested in these partnerships. So we're able to have people now going door to door in these high census tract areas where we know that we have a high number of cases so that we can stop the cases from growing. While we want to be socially distanced, we recognize that all of the communication we've done and all the education we've done hasn't impacted the communities that are most hard hit. So we're going to be using an old-fashioned organizing model where you go door to door and we're talking to people one-on-one and or to small businesses, which are also an area that we're having challenges. What was the other question? Did I get all of those?
I think one of the questions had to do with, like
why time?
Yeah.
So part of the reason for that is that, remember that this is a global crisis. So everybody's looking for all of the same things at the same time. Lab capacity, swabs, reagent, and all of that. And one of the challenges, in fact, that our hospitals are having, and we've had too, is that we purchase things that have literally been taken at one point by the federal government, where we purchased things, they took them, and then they reallotted them. So this is a very challenging market problem. So what we're trying to do at a local level is find these new partners. And that's why I talked about these small labs instead of using just the large labs that the county's investing in. I will just compliment one of our partners, and that's Kaiser, for really building out their own lab. And we're going to be in this for a while, so we're going to have to make some investments that we just up to now didn't have to make. The reason you're seeing the time challenges, if everybody who's testing starts to send all of their tests to one or two labs, those labs get backed up. So we've got to get more lab space. We've got to continue to fight for new technologies that are going to make it easier for us not to all be relying on the same 1, 2, 3, or 4 reagents, swabs, glass tubes, all of that. And that's what we're trying to do now.
There were a couple questions relating to COVID and the jails in terms of how are we dealing with COVID in the jails, and what are we doing to stem the rise of COVID in the county jails?
Those great question. We're increasing the frequency that we're testing staff, and that's one area that I think is going to be really helpful. The other is our protocols now have us testing people who we put in custody before they get into the jails and keeping them separated. So we're continuing to do that. In addition, we're isolating people who are in custody now, who we think are COVID positive before they mix with others. And where we have COVID positive inmates who are in custody, we're grouping them together so that we can properly separate people in the jails. It's certainly something that we have to continue to work at. The jails also have a very extensive internal investigation system so that they're able to determine who's been exposed relatively quickly so that we're able, again, to isolate them and get them the tests that they need. There's no question it's a problem. I will say that our jail was one of the last that had a significant problem, and I think in part because we had really strong protocols. Unfortunately, what that means is we've had less people being able to come into the jails to do programming, and so we're really working with those challenges now, but certainly we're going to continue to do more in that area.
Terrific. We had a question about the contact tracing and how that's going, and where we stand in training and making this an effective program for the county.
So with contact tracing, we've hired an outside partner called Haluna Health, and Haluna Health has been helping us and supporting our efforts to do training and to be able to access volunteers better. Let me just make one point about contact tracing in a whole bunch of areas. We are going to need volunteers, and I just want to remind folks that we've had resources come down from the federal government, but the resources that have come to local governments have not been enough to cover the costs of the service that we're providing, whether that's providing testing or contact tracing. So what we've asked is for both volunteers from the public and then for local governments to reassign people, and including the state has reassigned people. Over 300 of the 900 people we have now are actually county employees. So what we're in the process of doing now is we have enough people right for this moment, but we're continuing to onboard people, and we're also retraining the people that we have so that we're continuing to get better at motivational interviewing. And that's important because in contact tracing, what we're trying to do is speak to the person who's tested positive, make sure that they get connected to the resources that they need, and then being able to find out everybody who they have had contact with. So that process is we're at 72% of all of our calls are getting responded to. The national average where we'd like to be is at 90, and that's part of the reason we're doing the retraining. And let me just be candid, it's a big operation. We've put it up relatively quickly. We're partnering with the state of California to use a platform that they're asking us to use so that we can better share information with other counties, because as you know, people may work in one county, live in another, went to visit a family member in a whole nother county that got them sick. So we really have to figure out a way to work more collaboratively together. I would say contact tracing is moving well, but it's a work in progress, and one that we're going to continue to examine at the Board of Supervisors to make sure that it's doing the thing we most need it to do, which is help us identify people who are sick, find out people who've been exposed, and get people who are sick or who have been exposed the services they need.
Terrific. I'm gonna move to some other questions because it's clearly you cover more than just COVID. There's lots the county does, and one of those things the county does concerns the VTA, and you're chair of the VTA this year. And one of the questions I received said, do you see BART Phase 2 through downtown San Jose at risk because of the pandemic and economic fallout?
I think that the economic implications of this are something that none of us really know. But what I feel hopeful about with BART and a lot of our construction activities is that one thing I think we all understand about the economy, at least of this country, is that the more resources we can push into construction, that has a a rate of return through our communities that's really profound. And so my hope is that the federal government will continue to push money down into construction projects. And so while I'm always concerned it may mean that it takes longer, I'm not concerned that it will get done.
Terrific. Okay. And you had earlier in your comments talked about a little bit about the digital divide and of what the county is doing. There were several questions around that. I think the one from Deanna Persai really captures this idea of, what can Rotary clubs do to help close the digital divide?
Thank you for volunteering the Rotary Club. I love it.
Deanna Persai did, not me.
Thanks, David. One thing I would say is that we really need the kind of advocacy that treats digital access the way we treat water and garbage service to every home. It's got to be considered a basic. And what that means is that governments, in partnership with the private sector, need to focus on doing the hard thing. So the fast thing is that right now, it's much easier to put up the cell towers and single cell or the cellular capacity from the towers, but we really need to also build out and continue to build out the fiber in communities that are hard to serve right now. And it's an expense, and it's difficult for companies to do that if they can do the quick fix of just addressing by putting up cell towers and then the equipment that goes to them. And I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words there. So let me tell you what the county's doing right now. The city of San Jose has been amazing. And I just want to acknowledge, council members Carrasco and Arenas and Sparza for really leading the charge there, and the mayor and his team for negotiating with AT&T a great deal there, and Dr. Dewan for keeping our eyes on this. But I'll tell you what I'm looking at from a county perspective. I'd really like the county, along with other public landowners, to look at how we partner with these companies in a way that allows them to use land for fiber in exchange for appropriate and low rates for high need families, so that really this is something that we really address in our time.
Got it. The pandemic, you've talked to, the pandemic is having a big effect on the local economy. And next week, in fact, you've delayed the budget deliberations to next week. And one of the Rotarians, Jay Ross, wanted to know, the county board is contemplating new taxes to help solve budget problems caused by the pandemic. How is the tax reconciled with the economic suffering and losses that residents have experienced due to the pandemic?
So it was a recommendation that I made to my colleagues, which was to do a 5-year a time-limited sales tax that could focus on COVID-19. I think one of the things that I have come to understand is that the need in our community, particularly because the federal government is not continuing to make investments in local government, is that as a community, we're going to have very difficult choices to make relative to how we fight COVID-19. We're spending a lot of money to feed people. We're spending an awful lot of money in our healthcare system. We are spending a lot of resources on on testing, tracking, and tracing. We have 43,000 people who are at risk of being homeless. I think that I saw a limited tax as a reinvestment, and a community saying we're all in to get ourselves through this and making sure that we're not leaving people behind.
Got it. Thank you. Let's see here. Steve Prody asked a question. Can you talk about the new normal? What things are we doing now that are new, but will be part of what we're doing on a go-forward basis?
What a good question. I'm sure I don't know the answer to that. I will say that I think that one of the big challenges we're going to have is really, as a community, being deliberate about what we want our community to look like long term. And I know this isn't exactly the question you're asking. I will say that I've observed my husband and my son recreating what it's like to be in a baseball stadium in our living room as they're watching games, and I'm watching sunflower seeds and every other thing in our living room. But I don't know that. What I do know is that I think this is an opportunity for us to make some decisions as a community. How are we collectively going to address the digital divide? And let's do that. How are we going to make sure that we're addressing homelessness? Let's do that. I think that we've slowed down and sped up in a way that's going to give us an opportunity to decide the kind of community we want to be and how do we prioritize our resources.
Thank you. We've had you mentioned homelessness. It's been something that you've been passionately involved in. Judge Weisbrot will want to know, is the effort to provide housing for the homeless actually losing ground? Are the number of new homeless exceeding the amount of new housing?
That's a really good question. I think what we are seeing is definitely a growth in encampments. And what's hard to know is, are people moving from one place to another? So actually, we're going to be taking a look at that and working with the city of San Jose, putting a little working group between us and the water district, the city of San Jose, and our health department to dig in and better understand that.
Thank you. In terms of what steps is the county doing in terms of climate change? In terms of the climate change issue, is climate issues have become an increasingly big issue nationally, but locally in terms of around the Bay, rising sea levels, et cetera. What is the county doing to address some of those issues?
So one thing that we're broadly doing is this remote work strategy, because I do think that, you know, we just have to acknowledge the impact of fossil fuels, single occupancy vehicles, in terms of how that's impacting climate change. The other is that we have a really broad sustainability master plan, and we're doing, you know, REACH codes, and I would say a lot of the things that we should be doing. Where I think there's a hole and an opportunity is that the 9 Bay Area counties have an opportunity, I think, to take what the Air District is doing, what the Metropolitan Transportation Commission is doing, and what all these different entities are doing around pieces of addressing climate change and addressing, you know, really what I would say is like a cacophony of impacts. And what we're trying to do right now is through a regional group that I'm chairing, is getting all of those different agencies to work together to look where there's an overlap and look where we can join our resources between counties and these special districts to really start to address climate change, including sea level rise.
Thank you. And this will likely be the last question. So I appreciate all your time, and I'm going to take the prerogative of being my question, which has to do with, okay, you get a call today and we have a vaccine. Okay, what is the county doing to be ready for that moment, so that we can get the most, so that the divide, or the income divide, that we really do distribute this in a way that meets the values that I think you are striving for.
It's such a good, profound question. David, leave it to you to have the hardest question of the day. And I appreciate it. I think that one of the things that I'm observing, especially if I look at San Francisco, is that I think an opportunity that San Francisco had is that they did a really good job, because they were the home of really starting to address HIV long before others in the country did, that they built out a network. And I think that that really allows all parties and the neediest people to have access to public health. And I think what we're doing is we're really investing in the backbone of these services where people are in highest need. And I think if we build the trust with all of our communities, that people are willing to come forward and be part of getting a vaccine, that I think it's really going to be about the relationships that we build in our community and the backbone we build in our health systems and the partnerships we build. And I want to just close, if I could, with this thought. And I think we can't underestimate the power of collaborative leadership. And I say that because I talked a lot about leaders in the community that I've seen rise up, but I was thinking about Jeff Hare, who I know is a member and my neighbor. And when COVID-19, when we very first started to understand what it was, he was the first person who walked our street to make sure that everybody who needed someone to go grocery shopping for them could get groceries. And I think that kind of real collaboration, getting to know our neighbors, being willing to invest in each other, I think that's what's going to get us through. And I think that's what's going to help us when vaccines become available, that we really are the community we most want to be, one that's inclusive, caring, strong, thoughtful, and a leader, not just in our own communities, but across the world.
Well, thank you very much, Cindy, for you doing a hell of a job. The County Supervisor Cindy Chavez and President of the Board for today's program. A contribution has been made to our city forest on your behalf and on behalf of all program speakers to plant 46 shade trees in East San Jose during my year. This will relieve the heat islands that they experience. It'll improve the ambient temperature, air in those neighborhoods, and it'll dress up the neighborhoods. Also, as a goodwill gesture, our club will donate a coffee table-sized Rotary history book, 100 Years of Service, personally delivered to your district office. At my request, these books were set aside last year for this purpose by past President Karen Sinanutari. Once you've read it, you'll be amazed at how much this club has done for our communities. And we would like that book to remain with the office for subsequent office holders, so they too can become familiar with the community services our club members have done since our founding 106 years ago, and it's continuing. Next week, we've got Nicole Taylor, President and CEO of Silicon Valley Community Foundation. She's heading up the third wealthiest foundation in the world with assets around $13.5 billion. She's got a Stanford BS degree in human biology and a master's in education. She'll be talking about keeping it local, how community foundations are meeting the Bay Area's COVID-19 and the racial justice challenges. So there you have it. I'll ask her how come we only get 8.5% of the money that they distribute every year that goes to Santa Clara and San Mateo counties. The rest of it goes, who knows, all the rest of the world. So is it really a community foundation? Don't forget, we got breakout rooms immediately following this meeting. They'll last about 20 minutes. And to paraphrase my favorite immigrant governor, hasta la vista, Rotarians. This Zoom meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.